So the beginning of this episode has two jokes that kind of got me into trouble. First, I make a passing reference to some of the writing being like solid waste, which some hardcore Berserk fans kind of took exception to. Fortunately, Berserk fans tend to be pretty mature, understanding people, so I explain, I love Berserk. That was just a joke. But I really realized if I have to go out of my way to say that, and it just doesn't show up in my work, then I'm not doing my job. So after that, I decided that I really needed to be a little more gentle, and, sure, poke fun at the series when it deserves it, but I shouldn't go out of my way to just be sarcastic and snarky for no reason but the hell of it. And then, coming up here, you'll also see, here it is, Griffith makes a comment about, haven't you ever seen a shonen anime before? Which, a bunch of people, corrected me. Technically, Berserk is seinen, which, of course, technically they're right. Which I knew, but technically my concern was that more people might know what shonen means, whereas seinen's a more obscure term. But if you'll notice, after this, I always make sure to use the term action anime, rather than either shonen or seinen, which kind of just avoids the issue altogether. My Griffith voice has definitely changed a lot since those days. At first it was a little more subtle and mysterious, and didn't quite have that lilting, flamey, hey guts quality to it quite yet. In these early episodes, I'm really just getting the feel for a lot of my voices. My Corcus voice, coming up in a little bit here, is way too close to my Guts voice in these early episodes. I was able to differentiate them a little more as I progressed, because Guts is very deep, but not particularly gruff, whereas Corcus is he's a little more gravelly. Actually, vaguely based on Otto from The Simpsons.
What was that? I said, good thing Kuska's here to make sure we follow all the rules, right?
Now let's plan our raid on the enemy we're suddenly fighting for some unexplained reason, possibly having to do with drugs.
And then here we have the birth of Frank, who's essentially an original character that I made up for the show. I knew that there was a scene coming up with a lot of fire, and for a child of the 90s like me, the obvious joke to make is, fire, fire, from Beavis and Butthead. Unfortunately, little Karibo had already turned, essentially, two of his characters into Beavis and Butthead, so I wasn't sure if I could use that joke. The compromise I decided on was that he would sound like Beavis, but, and he would, in the background of this speech, every time there's a double entendre having to do with sex, but I decided he would never actually say, fire, fire! I would just tease it and never actually deliver. And then as that character progressed, I decided that anytime you heard background music, it would be that character. Here I use Billy Joel's We Didn't Start the Fire to go to the fire scene. And my theory was that Frank was just back there hiding behind a bush with a boombox just snickering to himself because he finds that shit funny, which I always thought was a bizarre, hilarious idea. Maybe that's just to me. But, as I understand it, back in the silent movie days, they were worried about putting music in movies because they thought that the audience would get confused. Oh, where's the orchestra? So, I guess if you wanted to get as reaching as much as humanly possible, you could say, oh yeah, this is a play on that. I don't know that I really ever thought about it that deeply until afterwards, though. And here we've got some Beatles coming up, some DBZ audio, and some... what else did I use? Monty Python. I had this idea back then that since I wasn't going to do stingers at the end of the episode, I would use a lot of audio clips in the middle, basically just stingers within the episode like this, and that would kind of be my style. I think that worked to a point, but I think in this particular episode, I kind of overused it a little. I think that works a little better when it's unexpected, whereas if you do it too much, it becomes just kind of expected, it doesn't have that same impact if it doesn't come as a surprise. And here we have the introduction of Pippin, who I love doing his voice, that stereotypical black guy voice, but I was never quite comfortable with it. It's like, am I playing with stereotypes? Does that make me racist, or am I playing... Is it a parody of racism? Where am I going with this? Is there a message? There really isn't. So after a while, I was kind of grateful that that guy didn't have many lines, so I didn't have to worry too much about what the black folks in my audience might have thought of that character. Oops, out of time. Alright, see you next time.